Hi friends, it's Megan. It's Wednesday Devotionals. I have a fun one for you today. Well, actually, I think they're all fun. It's kind of something new. So if you don't like them, sorry, but it's something entertaining. And I hope that those of you who've continued to watch through this pandemic, maybe you've learned something. You'll get to hear some of the things that I've learned today. But I want to start with the question that I'm working with today. What have you done to take ownership of something? What have you taken ownership of? How has that ownership impacted your environment? So I realize that's 3 questions and I only said 1. However, you'll understand why I put all 3 of those in there. First of all, I'm going to read a passage for you today from Matthew. And I want to be clear, this is out of the Message. So it's a paraphrase. Eugene Peterson wrote it. Looks just like this. It's really good for a lot of things for a different perspective. And that's why I'm reading it out of here today instead of one of our NRSVs or our NIV or even Good News or whatever other Bible translation you have. The Message is good for a good different perspective. It's in common everyday language and it is a paraphrase. So first, here is Matthew chapter 7, verses 13 through 20. Again, this is out of the Message. Don't look for shortcuts to God. The market is flooded with surefire, easygoing formulas for a successful life that can be practiced in your spare time. Don't fall for that stuff, even though crowds of people do. The way to life, to God, is vigorous and requires total attention. Be wary of false preachers who smile a lot, dripping with practiced sincerity. Chances are they are out to rip you off some way or other. Don't be impressed with charisma. Look for character. Who preachers are is the main thing, not what they say. A genuine leader will never exploit your emotions or your pocketbook. These diseased trees with their bad apples are going to be chopped down and burned. That is Matthew chapter 7, verses 13 through 20. Those are harsh words. Those are scary words sometimes. And if you want to see a different translation, again, it's Matthew chapter 7, verses 13 to 20. You can go look it up in whatever translation you choose. But I wanted to ask you, ownership. Now, I've got to be honest. I haven't taken ownership of a whole ton of things, material-wise, I guess. Yes, this is our second house that we've owned. I have purchased only 1 car in my life. Let's see. Those are the major things I'd say. Major material things, I guess you could say. Yes, I have paid for my education with significant help from both my parents and the federal government loan program. Thank you very much. Yes. But ownership. One of the favorite ownership things that I did was I remember stepping into my preschool classroom for the first time when I was told it was going to be mine. It made a significant difference in how I saw it. If I was an assistant in a classroom, it made a difference. I did have ownership in it, but I was not the teacher. When I stepped into that classroom as the teacher, it made a big difference. And when I had to leave that classroom because of our move, it was hard. It felt like a death. It was difficult because I loved that classroom and I loved the students and the people that I interacted with there. Ownership is a funny thing. Sometimes it's physical ownership. Sometimes it's more of a mental ownership. The question that I want to ask you is, how does ownership impact the environment around you? Or when you have ownership of something, how do you impact the environment around you? Your environment is something that I think is significant and something we are having to take a look at lately through this pandemic where we are so closed off from many things. We're not able to do as much as we want, and now we have new closure orders that are affecting a lot more again. And to be honest, I'm fearful that that's not the end. I don't know, and I hope and pray, I really hope and pray that that's the end of it, and maybe we can affect some change again, I hope. But we are forced to look at our environments and how our environments affect us and how we, in turn, affect our own environments. I want to ask you, how is your faith impacting your environment? How is your environment impacting your faith? For a while, I have talked about ownership of your own faith, and maybe not in devotional so much, but in my own life. When I have one-on-one conversations with people, I ask them, or I often wonder, do you really have ownership of your faith? What is in your heart? What God has put into your spirit, your soul, into your life? Have you taken ownership of that? I'm not talking about an altar call where you ask Jesus in your heart. That's not what I'm talking about at all. I'm talking about your choice to grow your faith, your choice to seek out your own self-improvement, not compared to somebody else, but your own, as you watch others around you grow or not grow, as you watch others around you improve or not improve. Have you taken ownership of your own faith? Have you taken ownership of your own life? Those are tough questions, and I have to be honest with you. I feel like a lot of the times that's what you hear me say here, and maybe that's helpful, maybe it's not. But I've had to look at some hard truths these last few months, my own hard truths, my own failings, some of the ugly things that I don't really like. And I've had to look at myself in light of those. When I talked about the comparison game earlier, it wasn't to compare anything else. It was to realize that I had been doing that. And boy, it had gotten bad. Comparing myself to other people, how they raise their children and how they don't, how I raise my children, how I don't, how Chris and I parent together or how we choose not to. It depends. But I had to confront the fact that I was only comparing myself to other people, not how I could self-improve. That was hard. And I also had to confront the fact I'm wondering how much I'm growing in my faith as we're not worshiping together in person, in a physical area together, as we are watching church online or not watching church online, as we worship together in multiple communities or as we don't. I've had to confront some of those challenges. And you know what? Some of them hurt a little bit, and some of them exposed something that I didn't necessarily like in myself. It was a challenge. I'm asking you today, friends, have you taken ownership of your own faith? What are you doing to grow that? I know I've had to look at some of my own, like I said. Are you working to improve yourself? Or is your environment getting you down? I know that not being able to go many places is hard, I'm sure. Believe me, my kids and I have both seen it. And as we question how things are going and question what we're doing, have you questioned about your own soul, your own spirit? Are you growing that? Are you taking ownership of that? What are you doing to improve it? There's so many good things out there. There's so many amazing ways to do that. Maybe that's the next thing that we can talk about. Maybe that's the next thing we'll hear. But I want to ask you, are you growing? Are you thinking? Are you participating in your own faith? I wrote down a few other questions, and some of them we've talked about, but the one big thing I want to ask you is, what has changed you through the last few months? 3, 4, 5 months? Has anything changed? Have you chosen to change? How has your environment impacted you? How have you impacted your environment? And most importantly, I think, how have you grown your faith? How have you worked on it? It's not an easy thing, but I would encourage you to try. Look, maybe search a little bit. Might not be easy and it's probably going to hurt. However, reach out for help. There are people who are so ready to give a hand. I would be one of them. Reach out. How have you grown and taken ownership of your faith? Dear friends, I would invite you to, this week, pray for yourselves. Be bold. Go to God and say, God, this is what I want. Now, be careful, because God may answer back and say, that's fine, but it's not what you need. Those are hard. I would encourage you to pray for yourselves. Ask God for that time. Be bold and ask, and be ready for an answer. Remember, God loves you. So do I.